Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Haifong. I am joined here by Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, former Chief of Staff to Colin Powell and retired Army Colonel, and Patrick Henningsen, independent journalist and geopolitical analyst for 21st Century Wire. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me today.
Good to be here today.
Great to be with you, Danny.
Yeah, well, let's get started. So I know you two probably have heard the war address of Donald Trump in the last 24 hours overnight, and where he declared that there will be at least 2 to 4 more weeks of fighting. The markets are going crazy right now, but one of the stark things that I found to be very surprising was, or at least not surprising at all, but maybe it comes to a shock to the U.S.'s war machine, is that as Donald Trump was saying that missiles are done, Iran's missiles are done, its navy is done, its army is finished. Iran launched one of its biggest missile strikes on Israel and the rest of the region of the Gulf, region overnight, as Donald Trump's speech was was about to happen and afterward. So here's just one report from Fox News as Donald Trump's speech was about to happen.
Pounded by Iran. In the Supreme Court, Israel is being pounded by Iran. Sirens sounding over Tel Aviv as a barrage of missiles hit the nation. Let's bring in Jonathan Hunt with more. Jonathan.
Kayleigh, Israel in general and Tel Aviv in particular have been under almost constant bombardment throughout the day today. One of the most intense bombardments, in fact, since the very early days of this war. Just about an hour ago, we had an hour-long series of sirens. We watched as the interceptors were launched from this area at those missiles, which came in one after another after another.
So, and here's just some of the results of that. In B'nai B'rith, there was a major sewage disaster that was caused by these missile strikes. And maybe I can start with you, Patrick. Your impressions. I can play a little bit later the biggest part of the speech, which was his announcement of how long this war would go from here. But ultimately, what is your impressions of not only Donald Trump's speech, but also how Iran has responded and behaved before and during and after?
A loss for words at this point, so it's just flip-flops by the day, flip-flopping by the hour. It was only a couple of days ago we had this vaunted 15-point or whatever peace proposal ultimatum, and that just sort of slipped off the news cycle, and then another announcement is made, and when you take over the national airwaves to the president to make some kind of a major address. One expects that when the president does that there'll be something of substance that he's going to share with the American people, some kind of a announcement or some sort of major policy announcement or declaration of something or other. But he didn't say anything that we hadn't heard 100 times before in the usual waffling manner. This was the most incoherent. Donald Trump, the president of the United States, his addresses are getting increasingly incoherent. It's very hard to follow his line of thinking, if there is any line of thinking to follow there. It reminds me of that scene out of Apocalypse Now where Martin Sheen's character was talking to Colonel Kurtz, and Colonel Kurtz says to Martin Sheen, what do you think of my methods? And Martin Sheen looks at him and he says, I see no methods, sir. That's kind of the feeling I get with Donald Trump, completely lost in the jungle. In his own sort of delusional world. And, if you want to pick apart the lies on this, Danny, I mean, we could go back to his recollection of history is quite amazing, that he says that the United States was in the Vietnam War for 19 years. I think I wrote it down, 19 years, 5 months and 29 days. And you know what? I was like, where did you get that figure? And I thought, wait a minute, Stephen Miller or whatever is writing this speech. So I should just go to Wikipedia, because that's probably where they get their numbers from. And if it's if I'm not mistaken, the U.S. official involvement or combat operations in Vietnam began after the Gulf of Tonkin incident. And so I believe that was 1964. And hostilities ended with the Paris Accords, March 29th, 1973. So really, it wasn't 19 years, President Trump. It was, by my estimation, 8 years, 7 months, and 22 days. But then again, I'm not qualified enough to be writing speeches for the President of the United States. So what would I know? And I could go on. The other one was Wikipedia, basically. All of these were gleaned from Wikipedia. So the President's point was, hey, stop complaining about this war. World War I and World War II, Korea, Vietnam were much longer. This has only been 32 days. So he's almost browbeating the American public in a kind of very crass, strange type of way that's kind of a joke, really, at this point. I mean, it doesn't really dignify any response, the speech that he gave. And also, I mean, he said that, it's the same thing, the justifications for the war. And I'll be brief, okay, and hand over to Colonel Wilkerson. But he said that Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terror. This is a complete lie. This is straight out of the Israeli lobby talking points memo. It's repeated ad nauseum by every U.S. politician and media outlet. It's simply not true. He said that Iran is killed the American soldiers in the Beirut Marine barracks bombing in 1983. Ostensibly, that's assuming that Hezbollah did that. Hezbollah didn't announce a formal organization, didn't have a manifesto until 1985. Okay. The context is important. Israel was occupying South Lebanon, and the U.S. were militarily occupying Lebanon, and U.S. naval destroyers were shelling targets within Lebanon at that time. So those were Lebanese resistance factions, whatever name you give them. And the other one is IED roadside bombs in Iraq, Iran slaughtering our soldiers. No, those were Iraqi resistance. Mind you, some of the Shiite resistance that were armed and trained by the United States military. Okay? So these weren't Iranians. And America did illegally invade and occupy Iraq. So our soldiers were there illegally under a fake justification of WMDs. And then he has his own WMD fraud, which is that Iran was an imminent threat weeks away from a nuclear weapon, another WMD fraud. So every single bit of Trump's case of why Iran is evil, that they're a #1 state sponsor of terror. No, the United States is the #1 state sponsor. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, these are the #1. Israel, these are the #1 state sponsor of terror on the planet, not Iran. Iran was fighting our terrorists. Qasem Soleimani was fighting our terrorists. Hezbollah were fighting terrorists that we armed, that we backed, that we financed in Syria, in Iraq. Okay, that's a fact. So the lies that the U.S. rests its imperial narratives on are just breathtaking. And very few people, especially in our media, the New York Times said these are our takeaway points from Trump's speech. They didn't refute any of the lies, practically, that the president said. So there's our mainstream media. So what good is any of this, really?
Yeah, great points, Patrick. I think it's a great foundation. And Colonel Wilkerson, it seems when Donald Trump was talking last night, he was essentially making conclusions that, in effect, Iran called bluff on. Even before, you had Pezeshkian, president of Iran, releasing a letter just giving the facts, a lot of the facts of which Patrick and both of you have come on the show and talked about in terms of the root causes of this war. But nonetheless, Iran has responded in a big way. It doesn't seem like it is militarily defeated one bit, despite the fact that the U.S. and Israel, especially the U.S. and Donald Trump, are saying this is going to be over in 2 to 4 weeks. What's your reaction to the speech and to the battlefield realities, and if there's a gulf between those two things? No pun intended, I guess.
Actually, I had this speech summed up for me, and it was a very brief summary. It didn't need to be very lengthy. At about 3:34 a.m. this morning, I didn't watch it, didn't want to, couldn't stand it. And then I decided I would tune over to whatever Iranian spokesperson I could find that might either be almost simultaneously, near simultaneously responding to the speech or giving me a broader tapestry. And lo and behold, what did I find? Next to Sergei Lavrov and Wang Yi in China, probably the best diplomat in the world right now. Under the press of events, you could say he had to be, but I think he is. Abbas Araghchi, talking at great length on Al Jazeera English. A nice choice, that, Al Jazeera English, even though he decided to speak in Farsi. And therefore, the translation slowed things down a bit, but made me listen a little bit more intently. And I listened to a man destroy Donald Trump, destroy Steve Witkoff, destroy Jared Kushner, destroy Bibi Netanyahu, not with bombs, not with bullets, bayonets, none of that. He destroyed them with words, words that rang true, words that were resolute, words that said what was happening right now, words that said Witkoff has not talked to a single Iranian, period. Now go back and look at that cabinet meeting where Witkoff in his sycophancy is trying to impress Donald Trump as much as possible and telling him about all the things that they did and that they came to no fruition. Well, they came to no fruition basically because he didn't talk to a single solitary Iranian. He talked to Pakistanis, he talked to Omanis and others who were offering their good offices and maybe a third or fourth level intermediary. He never talked to any Iranians, and Araghchi simply just blew him out of the water on that. And of course, consequently, Trump out of the water on that. Then the second thing he did was express what Iran's, and implied that they had delivered this, however, telephonically, by letter, by email, whatever, just by saying it in the councils of government, whatever, they had delivered what are their conditions for this war's cessation. And they are straightforward. They are very logical. They are very understandable, especially given what Patrick just said about our fault in all of this. And they are clear. And basically what they say is that little vermin known as Israel and its big daddy have to stop, period. They have to stop. And maybe there's some other things like reparations even and some other things that have to flow out of that, but they have to stop. They went well beyond the 5-point plan of the Chinese and the Pakistanis articulated a few days ago. But he's very adamant about it. And I think he's being straightforward. He's being a diplomat. He's being honest. And he's telling the world and Donald Trump, if Donald Trump will listen, which I doubt, precisely how Iran sees this. And they're not going to stop until the last Iranian is dead or these conditions are met. Take that, Donald Trump.
Yeah, and Patrick, I'll just pull up the shape of everything that happened surrounding this speech in terms of Iran's military, targeting its strikes. Multiple waves. Of course, we have the missiles fired at Israel, Qatar, Amazon data center in Bahrain, which Iran claims has been destroyed. And more than 150 missiles and rockets fired from Hezbollah. And then I want your reaction to this, Patrick. Here is what the United States is doing in response to this speech. Donald Trump is gloating about the bombing of an important bridge that was just about to be completed, called the B1 bridge. And here he is gloating about it. The biggest bridge in Iran comes tumbling down, never to be used again. It's time for it to make a deal, Iran to make a deal before it's too late. So there you have the contrast, Patrick. React to what you find important about this development, these developments. Oh,
and
yes,
if Patrick doesn't mind for just 1 second, because you mentioned Bahrain, let me point out another thing that just indicts Rubio and Hegseth. They ought to be frog march to the guillotine. 2,000 people, most of them sailors, just arrived in Norfolk. They had a bag in their hand. In that bag were whatever sundries they could throw in them, whatever valuables, just a tiny bag. Now they are thrown on the Navy's responsibility in Norfolk. You know who's taking care of these people? The citizens of Norfolk, Hampton Roads, Chesapeake. No one told them. And they came to Bahrain after that devastating hit on the main facility, the refinery. They came to Bahrain and said, throw everything you can in a bag. This is as big a bag as you can take and get out of here because we're putting you on a plane. We're taking you out of here. That's how we evacuate. I'll bet you that's going on all across the region.
Yeah. Yeah, Patrick, step in.
What was your question before, Danny?
Oh, just I wanted to do your reaction to the contrast there. You have Donald Trump gloating about the destruction of a major Iranian bridge in the last 24 hours, especially after a speech, I believe that happened. And then Iran's list of just what it's still targeting, despite the claims that Iran is finished.
Well, on the Iranian side, hitting Israeli, another barrage hitting Israel. I mean, that just kind of speaks to the ridiculousness of the claims from the president. But what's more telling is the fact that Iran timed that missile barrage right at the end of Trump's national address, which was, in a way, the Iranians are very sophisticated in their ability to troll the U.S. and the West, not just in the social media, but also on the battlefield as well. So they're making a real statement there. And that, I think that was devastating for people in Israel. Again, where is Benjamin Netanyahu amongst all these barrages? He seems to be missing most of the time. Where exactly is he? What is the true situation of the political situation in Israel? So on the bridge, that's that type of bridge, that type of suspension bridge is the only one of its kind in Asia, I believe, or it's one of the greatest works of engineering of its kind in all of Asia. And so what do the U.S. have to do? Just destroy it? It's not a military bridge; that's a civilian bridge. It's probably going to create a lot of disruptions in terms of people needing to get. There's a reason they built a bridge over that sort of terrain, obviously, like any other place in the world. But it's just kind of petulant attitude and this kind of arrogant, I don't know, sort of evil, I guess, attitude by the president and this administration is that they're just going to wreck Iranian society. They said it. They said it out in the open. They said, we're going to make this country unable to function as a country, and they're justifying this by claiming this is backstopped by the lies, which I said at the beginning, which is that Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Ergo, this attack falls under the general banner of the global war on terror, Iran being the worst antagonist in this story. I mean, that's how they package it. That's how they justify it. Anybody pushing back or resisting Israel in the region is labeled a terrorist. And I'm telling you right now, this is the biggest problem in the international system now. This label has been abused. It's been used and abused. It's an arbitrary definition. It's practically meaningless at this point. It should be anyway, but it's being used to justify the worst war crimes some of the worst war crimes of the modern era. It's being used to justify ethnic cleansing in not just in Gaza, but also now in South Lebanon. Whole villages have been razed to the ground. Towns have been erased this week in South Lebanon. And Israel's openly calling for the forced ethnic cleansing under threat of death. That's exactly the same deal that they were giving Palestinians in Gaza. But it's justified because they're claiming that these are terrorist targets in South Lebanon, claiming Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. Well, it can be politically proscribed as a terrorist organization by Israel, and the lobby can pressure the U.S. to do the same, list it as a terrorist organization, pressure the British government, which they do, pressure the European Union, which they have, to say the Hezbollah, the IRGC, Hamas, these are not expeditionary terrorist organizations by any stretch of the imagination, nothing near the Al-Qaeda and ISIS variety, which somehow end up with U.S. arms, weapons, in the case of Syria, directly funded by our own governments. Okay, nothing like that. Nothing like that. but it's being used to justify the most horrific crimes against humanity, and it's being used to justify the beginnings, or at least I would say we're well into a third world war if this continues at this rate in the Persian Gulf, all based on this terrorist label. So I'm very pragmatic. I like to go to the source of, I like to look for the mechanism of, at least when we're looking at international relations, that is the mechanism, because that's backstopping all these policies, which are hugely destructive. So and I might add, Pete Hegseth tweeted out, I don't know if you have that one handy, Danny, but he said, back to the Stone Age. This, our self-styled Secretary of War, who ceremoniously got kicked out of the DC National Guard, has an incredible rap sheet and resume that certainly would disqualify you for any cabinet position, but somehow all of our senators voted to confirm him for that position, which I can't imagine why they would do that. I can't imagine which lobby in Washington instructed our U.S. senators to confirm Pete Hegseth as a Secretary of Defense. So let's just remind Pete that when Cyrus the Great, or inscribed on Cyrus's cylinder, the first Declaration of Human Rights, that was 600 BC. So where was Europe at 600 BC? I think Europe was living in caves with foraging and doing other things to try to survive. Basically, that's what Europe was doing at 600 BC. So, lecturing the Iranians about civilizational issues coming from Pete Hegseth, of all people, or from the United States, full stop. This is not going to deter the Iranians. Let me tell you, that bridge, I'll tell you right now, if it's not this year, if it's not in 5 years, that bridge will be rebuilt. Yeah. And everything else inside Iran will be rebuilt. They just bombed the pharmaceutical manufacturers just in the last 24 hours inside Iran. Why are they doing this? Because, and Iran's steel manufacturers. Iran's going to get steel. Guess who's going to provide steel to the Iranians now? China, Pakistan. They're going to get their steel, but the U.S. and Israel want to destroy all of their import replacement, all of their sanctions busting domestic industries. That's why they're trying to punish them for daring to have a domestic industry and put import replacements in to bypass U.S. sanctions. So there are no more military targets per se. So now it's all just civilian industry and just punishing them. And the last thing I'll say, and I think I probably said this before, but I'm sure Larry probably may or may not have recommended these books in the syllabus to his students, but the great scholarly works on sanctions, very, very simple game theory, including Daniel Dresner's excellent book called The Sanctions Paradox, that maps out every single case study of any situation where you're threatening the other side with physically threatening the other side, zero compliance. Your target will not comply to your demands if there is an implicit threat or the belief that there'll be more threats coming, or threats of physical violence or force in the future. Zero compliance. You're not going to get a deal. You can't bomb your way to a deal. That's not me saying that. If I'm advising the president, I just look at the research, the academic literature, and say, how is this different from every other 100 cases in the last 60 years? It's not. This is human nature. This is what international relations as a field of study is designed for. So you can predict how states are going to behave in situations and be advised accordingly. That's the whole reason why this exists. And this is lost on these people in the White House right now. Or it's not. Maybe it's not, and they're just sadistic. I don't know.
I think you may be stumbling onto some truth there.
Yeah.
I think you may be.
Colonel Wilkerson, I hand it to you, but before I do, I want to just make sure to note that to Patrick's point about Pete Hegseth, and this is what's so striking, is that all of Trump's administration, they're just yes men. They're just repeating what he says. They're repeating anything he does, anything he says. They're just going along and they're repeating it, because Donald Trump in that speech said exactly what Pete Hegseth decided to tweet out directly after it. Here's that.
Very shortly, we're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong.
So back to the Stone Ages where they belong, Colonel Wilkerson. But the problem with this, and to Patrick's point, I'll get your reaction to it, is The Economist is reporting that Iran is now earning nearly twice as much from oil sales each day as it did before the U.S. and Israeli bombs started following at the end of February 28th. It may be pummeled on the battlefield, but it is winning the energy war. Up. Sorry about that. Hold on one second. I got to get rid of this. I got to add this. So here it is. There's the quote from The Economist. And of course, it's The Economist. I wouldn't be so sure that it's being pummeled. Iran is necessarily being pummeled on the battlefield. But the point stands is that there are mainstream sources admitting that Iran is going to have revenue to be able to rebuild. The problem is it seems to be on the U.S. side, where there's a lot being lost and drained economically and militarily. Colonel Wilkerson, what's your reaction to this?
Well, you could be saying that we're deepening our inability to end this conflict, because one of the things that Foreign Minister Archie said was reparations. You're going to have to pay for all the destruction you've done, particularly to those targets that are not war targets, that are war crimes. You're going to have to pay to rebuild them. Now, I'm not saying for a moment that this country would do that, but I'm saying you are making your ability to end this conflict on some terms that might not be earth-shattering very, very difficult. And let's just talk about that for a moment. Here's a president who says we get all our own oil, not through the Strait of Hormuz, but elsewhere, meaning mostly we get it from the Permian Basin and other places like that in our own country. I got news for him. That didn't have much effect on the price of Brent or West Texas Intermediate. And I would suspect it doesn't have much of an effect on prices of other commodities that come out of the Strait of Hormuz that the world is only now, I think, in many places, learning about, such as helium and urea and other things that are critical. You were talking about the Strait of Hormuz not being critical to the United States. You are full of it up beyond the top of your head, Donald Trump, because what we're talking about is destabilizing the global economy to the point where we are almost right now, by the definition of the term, 2 quarters in a row in recession. You're talking about bringing about depression, and not just depression here or there, but global depression. That's what you're talking about, Donald Trump. Now, I don't think he gives a hang, which is another reason why I detest the man completely now. He has no positive redeeming characteristics whatsoever. And his Darth Vader, and for those of you who don't remember Darth Vader or never saw the movies, Darth Vader was the evil one for the Sith Lord in the Star Wars series. That's who Pete Hegseth is. Without the redemptive nature of having once been a Jedi Knight and therefore coming around at the end, as it were. Pete Hegseth is just that kind of person without any redemptive qualities whatsoever. We're looking at, and here's the second thing I'll say to that condition that I just described as potentiality. I've seen the second set of targets, regional targets, the Iranians are looking at. I know what they're talking about. I know where they're talking about hitting. I know what, from the first set of targets they hit, they can do. I know the devastation. I know the accuracy. And I know the exquisite selection of targets that were struck to make sure that we and the regional powers knew that Iran was making every effort to hit the United States of America. And in some cases, like Prince Sultan Air Base, the people who were supporting those facilities for the United States of America. This second set has no such inhibitions. And I have no question in my mind that they can hit them, and hit them with the incredible accuracy they did the first set and the incredible devastation. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Ras Tanura in Saudi Arabia with 550,000 barrels per day production throughput capacity. I'm talking about the other one up the stream from it, which produces 7% of the entire world's now light, sweet, and good crude, that Libya is kind of out of the picture for many purposes. We're talking about 7% of the global supply coming out of that one place. All it would take is a strike like they put on Bahrain, maybe another missile or two. That's out. I'm talking about the pipeline that the Saudis have built to kind of obviate the need for the Strait of Hormuz, although it doesn't do much of that, especially now with the Houthis having been at war with them for so long, that goes over vicinity of Jeddah to the Red Sea. They're going to take that out. I'm talking about every target in the region that applies to what I just said, global recession, depression. They're going to hit them. That's their second tier. So if we go on into this further, Donald Trump, you are going to set the world aflame economically, and you're going to make a pariah out of the United States like Israel is now. And that's a position from which it is going to take maybe a generation, if ever, to recover. That's what you're setting up, Mr. President.
Yeah, and Patrick, to that point by Colonel Wilkerson, I just want to pull up what Saudi Arabia is trying to do to bypass the restrictions that Iran has placed on the Strait of Hormuz. It's assertion of control. Here you have Saudi Arabia is trying to ship its oil now through the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. It has been doing so because Yemen has not closed it, but Yemen has said that they will close it should this war continue and to continue to escalate, which economists are noting in the West, Patrick, would be one of the worst disasters maybe in the history of modern energy production and distribution.
And Danny, I'll just add the capacity of what they're doing is about 1/4 of what would normally be flowing through the strait. So even that's an economic setback.
Yeah, definitely. So Patrick, your thoughts, your reactions to this? Oh, sorry. Hold on one second.
The interesting thing about that east-west pipeline, the Petroline pipeline there at Yanbu, that port, that facility on the Red Sea, as Larry rightly points out, it's only a fraction in terms of what it's able to deliver in terms of output that would normally go through. So it could deliver at the moment like 1.5 million barrels a day or something like that at full capacity based on what it's currently tooled up to do. But the shortfall on the global markets around 8 million barrels that are not coming through the Straits of Hormuz that would normally come through. But the thing is that Ansar Allah, the Houthis, have already targeted that port.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they've already proven, yeah.
As have Iran, I believe, earlier in the war, but continue, yeah.
Years ago, so a couple of years ago. So it's what the Houthis, as the Americans call them, Ansar Allah, their capabilities today are much better than they were 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So that's an open target. So this already been proven that can be taken out. So why would Saudi Arabia want to put the money into upgrading that port facility to use it for this great bypass, let's call it, if that can be just taken offline literally in a day by drones or missiles? That's as well, Danny, that Iran could target it as well. So in addition to all the important energy nodes that Larry mentioned there's also the military modes. Iran has been very, I would say, they haven't been very heavy-handed on all U.S. military positions in the region. And I think they've done that out of deference somewhat to Saudi Arabia, hoping to kind of appeal to Saudis, better side and more reasonable side in all of this. So there's that. Plus there's one major and one minor U.S. military base within Israeli so-called territory. Okay, and a lot of people aren't aware of that. The U.S. did open a permanent military base inside Israel. I think they opened that in 2017 or around there, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. But that's not the one. The one is what would also transform this geopolitically would be if Iran decided to, and they can, and they do have the range to hit Djibouti. Okay. And they could also, if they want, make life very uncomfortable for the UAE, the US, the British, and the Israelis that are currently trying to hold Socotra, which is a very important island. They're just off the Gulf of Aden, that's nearly looking into the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. It's strategically so important. It happens to be the eighth wonder of the world from a natural beauty point of view, but let's turn it into an aircraft carrier. But that's what's happened. That land has been stolen from Yemen and turned into a military base effectively. So, but that could easily come under threat. And that would be huge for Ansar Allah if this did kick off in that way. They would be looking to maximize their strategic gains as a result of that. So there's many more U.S. military targets in the region, and all of this just makes life a lot more difficult to stage any major military operations in the Gulf. And I wouldn't mind hearing Colonel Wilkerson's opinion on this, but what was all these announcements of the deployment of the 82nd Airborne and U.S. Marine detachments and all of these troops that were supposedly heading for the Middle East? Was this just a feint? Or I'm just logistically, Colonel, looking at this and thinking, how in the world can you stage an operation in the region? Where are you going to stage it with this amount of troops? And, you know, because you need you need places to stage the operations. You need fallback positions. You need logistical and supply lines. I can't see where they have that with that. So I mean, what were these announcements really about?
Right.
I have to imagine that it was probably mostly Hegseth. It might have been a little bit of Kane, because as I once said to Colin Powell, we don't really ever want to have an Air Force officer as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He agreed with me. And there's a reason for that, because they don't understand ground warfare. But I've got to understand too, I hope, that there are people around Kane and on the Joint Staff in particular that understand these things. So I have to look at most of these things, especially since I check with the MEU in Naha, the forward deployed MEU in Naha, Okinawa. They hadn't even received a warning order at the time that Hegseth was announcing and others were announcing that they were on the move. They hadn't even got a warning order yet. I checked with the other MEU on I believe it was in Southern California at Pendleton or somewhere around there. And they were alerted, but they didn't even have their ship yet. I believe it was Tripoli that hadn't showed up yet. In any event, it was quite clear to us, who were mostly military veterans who were looking at this across the globe, that we were saying things that weren't true. We were marshaling forces that didn't even know they were being marshaled. And in one case, we were marshaling a landing platform that wasn't even floating. So we got concerned about it. We started checking on the usual sources about, you know, anytime the 82nd is alerted, reporters usually know it because pizzas are bought, you know, and people are packing their bags and everything else. They watch Bragg pretty closely. Nothing was happening. So that was the first thing. We didn't understand what was happening. Were we fainting? You know, FEINTING. Were we deceiving? Was that what we were doing? Or did these people at the top simply not know what they were doing? Stupid. We concluded it was possibly a little bit of both, the fainting on the military side and the not knowing what they're doing on the other side. And Hegseth giving things to Trump like Trump gets given things by all of the sycophants around him. You know, you want some tariffs? Oh, I'll tell you the good tariffs to do. Do these. That's messing, of course. So the second phase, we saw some actual movement of forces, including platforms. And then we began to discover things like this. Okay, that aircraft carrier has F-35s on it. F-35s aren't allowed on that carrier to fly in anything but the catapult mode, and that carrier can't put them off in the catapult mode. What's going on here? Why do we have aircraft incompatible with the flat top surface, launching surface, with those aircraft on it? Are they just transporting those aircraft to someplace? Are they going to put them on one of the Marine LHAs or whatever that do have the platform and the deck that can withstand that downward pressure when it does a V-stall takeoff? All these things are coming together and telling us that, one, Hegseth is utterly incompetent, and Kane may be in the boat with him there too, and they aren't listening to other people who maybe are even doing what those sailors on Ford tried to do twice now. We've confirmed this. They tried to sabotage Ford with the sewage system first. That didn't work. So then they started fires on Ford, and now Ford, of course, is out of combat. She's back headed for Norfolk for probably a 2-year, maybe 3-year maintenance. All to say, we don't know what they're doing. And we have no idea what the people who might be able to execute something like Delta, SEAL Team 6 and so forth, the Rangers, the Washington Battalion haven't been alerted but not moved. Are they going to try to seize? And there were some people who almost convinced me that they really were doing all this conventional force maneuvering so they could hide this very careful Venezuela-like operation with Delta in the lead, and they were going after the uranium. And then we started looking at the weight of the uranium and what they'd have to carry that, to get it out of there. All to say, we're puzzled, to say the least. We don't know what they're doing. And it looks very strange to us. And it looks deadly if any of that coalesces around Karg or any of the other islands. Or, for example, no one's talked about this, but the greatest onward movement and forward movement facility in the area used for both Iraq wars was in Kuwait. Well, Iran hit it. The buildings were burning. So is that still a forward movement area for the United States in the region? It was the only one we had. We have one for Bright Star in Egypt, but it's really too far away. And you're talking about Ospreys that only have an operational range in this environment, probably about 350 to 400 miles. It's all strange. It's extremely strange. It looks like a lot of braggadocio without the operating forces to fulfill it. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, anything in response to that? I mean, right now we have a major disaster on our hands. Oil after this speech, dollars per barrel. We have prices going up, record prices for ground beef, shortages possibly in plastics, for water.
Danny,
Amazon.
When we did that simulation in Beijing, I told you about it a few months ago, it went to $200 before we were through.
Yeah, and many observers, economists, they're saying that if it does get to that point, it will be an economic recession, and the price increases we're seeing and the economic turbulence will be far greater than what's being experienced now. So, Patrick, any reaction to what Colonel Wilkerson said in the midst of this disaster? Because I think it's being downplayed a bit, even by those who are not for this war, are even maybe downplaying it a bit because they're looking more. I've been talking about this at the profits that are being made by U.S. LNG companies, et cetera. That might be masking a crisis that's bubbling. I don't know if you agree with that.
First, I'll just quickly address the political dimension, then briefly the economic dimension. And I was just in I'm in Arizona at the moment, which is a purple state, and I was in Texas this past week, and I went out and did some vox pops and did a report for a UK news agency, UK column, getting the impressions of people in the streets. Now, Texas is the hub of the U.S. military industrial complex. I mean, it is the biggest military state, has the most amount of veterans, and probably the most amount of active duty servicemen living within the confines of this massive state. So I went out and talked, a lot of veterans as well. And I was in Austin, greater Austin area, so Red Rock, Georgetown, and it's mixed. But, a lot of Vietnam veterans I spoke to, some on camera, by the way, they absolutely do not support this president and what he's doing with this war in any way, shape, or form. And they absolutely despised Pete Hegseth. And this wasn't just 1, 2, and this wasn't just older Vietnam vets. This was also younger, either formerly active duty, late 20s, early 30s. One gentleman from West Virginia, U.S. Navy veteran, told me that his very good buddy, and this is where the military get some of their best fighters, is from the what they call hillbilly country. Okay, ready to go into the Navy SEALs, and he said this person was a physical specimen, absolutely 100% Navy SEAL quality, and he basically, when this war started this past 4 weeks, he basically canceled it. He said, I'm not going into this organization. So I don't know what this person's career is going to end up being like, if it's going to be a military career at all, but basically it was a turnoff. So this idea that the entire rank and file is somehow behind Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump in this sort of aimless war is false. There's a lot of pushback. There are a lot in the veterans community and in active duty as well, just to add a little bit of extra receipts to what Larry was saying about the Gerald Ford, or what you were saying as well, Danny, about the Gerald Ford incident. So that's the first thing politically, the political dimension. There's a lot of dissent in the ranks. MAGA is fracturing, and the longer this goes on, this is basically another nail in the coffin of the midterms coming up, and that's just a fact. And they've given the Democrats a great campaign platform with this undeclared war of aggression. So that's the political dimension. On the economic dimension, aside from everything that's been said already, the fact is this: and the Straits of Hormuz, it's never going back to the status quo anymore. Whatever the previous world order was that governed how things work in that part of the world, it's not happening anymore. And the other thing people don't realize, which is quite short-sighted, and this might be too deep for the MAGA mind. Okay, it might be going too deep here, but why would Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and Google be putting these massive data centers in the Middle East? Because let me tell you, the cost of air conditioning alone, and I can tell you because they're doing the same thing in Arizona, and they're very expensive to maintain because of the heat. Okay, why are they doing that? Why? Because that's where the energy is. That's where the energy is to provide the baseload of power for those energy-intensive industries like AI and massive sprawling data centers. That's why Iran is targeting those Amazon cloud facilities in Bahrain most recently, as well as in the UAE and other places. That's where the energy is. So this idea that Trump's saying like, oh, we don't need to worry about the oil in the Middle East. We've got more oil. I can tell you that much. More oil than anybody has ever seen before. No, that's not true. It's a global market. The price of oil is global, and the energy intensive industries were based there, but they're not going to anymore. This is a new order in the Persian Gulf. So business as usual, it's not going to continue. So have they thought all of this out? Because this is transformational. So there's so many different aspects of this economically that are very, very hard to calculate and to predict until we get into the cycles of cause and effect. And we're getting into those now. And we're probably not going to see the downstream effects of a lot of this stuff for like 6 or 12 months. So it's not just about the stock market and the price of oil. There's a whole bunch of other things to consider here. Not only that, it's going to have to change. The Gulf states that are not going to get on board with normalizing relations with Iran and then reconsidering their position with Israel and the U.S. I'm going to tell you right now, and I've been in the Gulf, I've worked in the Gulf, I've traveled through the Gulf and the Middle East, and those regimes are not going to last a long time because there'll be no place. They can't fight wars. These family tribal monarchies that run these countries. I mean, Saudi Arabia is a country named after a family. I mean, yeah. Where this is just so it's all very tenuous. Their whole existence there is completely tenuous and completely reliant on things like desalination plants, importing slave labor from India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, and the Philippines, and the management class from Europe, and they're totally propped up by European international corporations and the people who work for those corporations. They can't exist. They can't have the modern economy that the Gulf's been marketing to the world. Come, bring your DFI to us. They're trying to build financial capitals to look past their oil future to become sort of, Singapore-style, mercantile-style financial hubs. That all is not going to happen anymore unless there's a chance it could, but they're going to have to partner with Iran. They're going to have to have normalization relations with Iran. Otherwise, they will not have a future. They are literally one, incident or one missile potentially away from a coup. Or the U.S. Listen, last thing I'll say is the United States. They're not. They have no love for these in Israel. They have no love for these Gulf monarchs. They can remove them like this. And if they do, they could do a military coup in any of these countries, just like that. And that's it. They're gone. They're off to Paris or London or Los Angeles or wherever they're going to end up. And then they'll be, the U.S. and Israel will manage a military dictatorship. That's what's going. That's what will happen. So I'm just saying, it's they don't really have a future there. They could, but the window of opportunity for them to make a decision on that will be closing rapidly, I think.
Colonel Wilkerson, I know you have another appointment, so I want to give you the final word.
But Danny, you were talking about, weren't we talking about before we went on the air, the maps that show how the Gulf states have switched their priorities now? They're going across Syria and up. They're eliminating Israel completely. No pipelines are going to flow across Israel. No pipelines are going to pump into Israel. And from what I'm hearing from the multinationals who have been fighting this business with the Kurdistan oil versus the Iraq oil, and now finally came to a deal that apparently Baghdad accepts, and so they're willing to come back in again, they're telling me the same thing. The pipelines are not going to go the way the pipelines were envisioned. The pipelines are going to ostracize Israel completely. That's the end of Israel. I think it's there already anyway. As a Jewish state, it's not going to continue to exist. It might be able to exist as a state that is democratic, genuinely democratic, and has both Palestinian, Arabs, Christians, and Jews in it, and treats them all roughly the same. But that's going to be a real hard road to hoe for these core Jews in Israel who still to this day may abominate Netanyahu, but love what he's doing to the Palestinians and want him to continue. Oh, by the way, he's not going fast enough. So this, as Patrick was saying, this whole region on an interim basis is going to change dramatically regardless. And on a long-term basis, these people are going to get rid of these regimes at some time. One wonders what will replace them, but nonetheless, I think they're going to get rid of them. So it's a very dynamic region that's going to be even more dynamic as the time goes forward and its economic circumstances shift. The question in my mind is how badly are they going to be damaged by what is coming if Trump continues on this utterly idiotic path of ignoring everyone else because we are, quote, self-sufficient, unquote, and everyone else is not. That is not the case. Just take a look at the world, particularly from an economic perspective, and you can see that globalization, whether you like it or not, is a point of fact reality today. And when you disturb these supply lines and you disturb them majorly and for lengths of time, you are asking for it.
Well, Colonel Wilkerson, I know you have another appointment in just a few minutes, so I'll let you go. Thanks so much for joining today. I really appreciate it.
Take care. Thanks for the chance.
Of course. All right. Patrick, I wanted to close maybe on this, maybe we could talk about to end here the big implications, the global implications that you were beginning to touch on of this war that are not going the way the United States and Israel want them to go. Here's an Economist, the newest Economist magazine cover. Never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. Now, this is a meme, actually. This is a popular meme among younger people on X being shown here. And with that quote has been going around for quite some time over the last year or two. But nevertheless, this says a lot because we are in a moment, Patrick, where Iran is saying Oman and Iran are going to dictate terms from here on out for the Strait of Hormuz. And that one of those terms, Patrick, is that these vessels are going to be settling now the tolls and also what they are bringing over to their respective countries in Chinese yuan, RMB, which is a major development. And all of this, I think is being ignored by the United States and Donald Trump as simply, well, we don't need the Strait anyway, which, as Colonel Wilkerson, you just said, is folly. It's it completely misunderstands and misinterprets their economic reality. So your reaction to this, because this is becoming more and more of a talking point in financial circles, the elite circles, this kind of panic around how we have a new order that is through this war being able to assert more control rather than less control over global economic development.
Yeah, I believe that quote there sometimes, I might be wrong, attributed to Sun Tzu's The Art of War, the on the cover there. The other one was Trump's meme on The Art of War is, if you don't have a plan or don't actually know what you're doing, neither does your enemy. That's the genius of Donald Trump. No, but all jokes aside, it's so okay. There is a power play from the U.S. side here, and they are attempting to play that. To what degree of success, that's another question. But the power play is that by choking off Qatari LNG to the Southern European conversion market, that it's opened up an opportunity for an increased supply of U.S. LNG to those European markets in the south that Qatar was servicing. So and that would be at a premium. So that would be sort of Nord Stream pipeline part 2, basically. So the U.S. effectively would be engineering, if they were successful, would be engineering pretty much a U.S. monopoly of the supply of natural gas to Europe, aside from what Norway ships via its pipeline to Poland. So that's significant because it gives the U.S. a incredible amount of leverage, increasingly so over the Europeans. Of course, the easy way for Europe to bypass that and to become like more independent would be to do a deal with Russia, of course. But anyway, that's not going to happen because Europe is not militarily occupied by Russia, but it's military occupied. Europe is occupied by the United States militarily. So, but there's some fissures happening in there. The U.S. is now talking about pulling out of its bases in Spain because Spain has denied it the facility to use those bases for launching bombing attacks on Iran. So, if that's the case, if they come good on that threat, the U.S. bases in Spain are not trivial. The U.S. bases in Spain, at least, they have Air Force, they have, I believe, Army, but mainly Air Force and Navy. And in fact, if our research on the Nord Stream pipeline shows that the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline, one of the main staging areas for the teams that did blow up the Nord Stream pipeline, NATO teams, was Rota in Spain. So Spain is a base of operations for attacking Europe for the United States, technically, if you want to look at it like that with the Nord Stream pipeline. But hey, that's just our forensic research, all fact-based, drawing from open source documentation and military documents and public statements and movements and so forth from the U.S. military. So what do we know? It's all published at 21st Century Wire anyway. But Italy is also now kind of throwing up resistance against Israel, and Maloney is talking about the possibility of economic sanctions, or at least on the terms of military procurements, those classifications of goods with Israel. So there's that. There's also a little bit of pushback from Italy on the staging, using Italy as a staging ground for U.S. attacks on Iran. So the European sort of matrix, if you will, for the U.S. and NATO has fissures in it. It is breaking, and not just under the pressure from the Ukraine war, but just now from this. So the general American attitude, if you look at the statements from Trump and people in administration, it's saying that we're very disappointed with NATO. They haven't come to our aid, and so why not? This is outrageous, and we started this a war that the U.S. started, and they're saying that somehow there's some Article 5 obligation to help the United States in a undeclared war of aggression. It's just kind of ridiculous. But that's the general thinking, is they're scapegoating Europe. Donald Trump originally courted Europe, if you remember, 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, he courted Europe for what? Why did he do that? Why did he say, "Come help me with the Straits of Hormuz"? Because the political pressure was getting too much, and all the focus was on the United States. So they needed to pull in European accessories to the crime, if you will, to build out the operation in order to diffuse the focus on the U.S. They wanted to paint targets for Iran on European countries like Denmark, like Britain, whoever else. So they need to send some Navy down there to help open the straits because it's not our oil, it's Europe's oil. So why don't they take care of their own oil supplies? We don't need the oil, says Trump in his speech again. We've got plenty, the most in the world, and in fact, ridiculous. So what he's trying to bring Europe into, to co-opt them into this disaster, and also to paint targets on them, because he knows that as soon as there's a European ship that gets hit or sunk, it's going to mobilize a lot of right-wing forces in Europe to sort of get on board with this war effort in the Middle East. They can build a coalition of the willing. And here we are getting into sort of Iraq war kind of orientation now in 2026. So that's all that was for at the end of the day. So it's very disingenuous for the U.S. to make these accusations at Europe, talking about energy politics with Europe, when the U.S. through this war is trying to game the supply of energy into Europe. And not only that, I don't know if you saw these reports, Danny, of the U.S. making overtures to China about buying U.S. oil.
Yeah.
And saying, hey, it's a shame what's happened here in the Persian Gulf. We've got plenty of oil to sell you, China. Why don't you just buy it from us? Obviously, probably at a premium, I would imagine. So they're in their mind, they're thinking, we have the world's largest proven or announced declared oil reserves. I don't think that's true, by the way. And I think it's in certain countries' interest not to declare their total reserves, like Russia. But anyway, that somehow the U.S. can supply the world with energy by knocking out or taking control of, and there is a school of thought there. This is part of the conversation in the White House, Danny. It sounds imperialistic and bombastic, but this is what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So I don't think China would go for that in a million years, become dependent on the U.S. for energy. Yeah. But they're going to try it because they believe that they have leverage. And they believe that they could pull it off.
Yeah, I mean, just even the thought of it is it's just a bad deal. Russia's right there, and hell, Iran and China right now are trading. Iran is exporting its oil in massive numbers to China, I'm sure, at a very friendly price. Now, Patrick, maybe we can close on your reactions to this, because this is breaking news as we're talking about oil and this war. We have now the world's most important price for real-world oil barrels has just surged to $140, the highest since 2008. And speaking of the impacts of this, Patrick, Amazon has just added a 3.5% fuel and logistics surcharge because of this. And there are reports that from fertilizers to plastics to all kinds of items across the supply chains, these are all going to face massive price increases the longer this goes on, which goes to show that the profits for the LNG companies and whatever, Trump, Hegseth, what they're thinking about raking in profits for them through this crisis doesn't necessary. It's not going to happen in a vacuum, and certainly the damage from all of this is not only going to affect them, but it's also going to cause shockwaves across the entire world economy. So your final thoughts on where we're at as we move into now as we're finishing week 5 of this war.
Well, what were the campaign promises for Trump? I'm going to lower gas prices, no new wars. No more useless wars. We're going to take care of America first. And so we'll get the opposite. Higher gas prices and more wars, endless wars, in fact, and promises of more wars in the future. And the president's even come to state publicly in the last 48 hours, I did hear this correctly. He says we can't afford Medicare. We can't afford these federal health care programs because we're fighting wars. So how many people do you think, if that was his campaign pitch in 2024, do you think he would have got all those Thomas Massey Republicans? Do you think he would have got all those libertarians, the Libertarian Party that were staging rallies for Trump, calling it, what was it, Reclaim the Republic, or I can't remember what it was, but those ridiculous rallies with Russell Brand and whoever else, I can't remember. But, you know, all those swing votes, all those independents, all those Ron Paul Republicans, they're all single issue voters in America. There's the anti-war vote. And then the economic, I mean, what's this president delivered economically besides announcements? He delivers announcements and tweets, but the tariff wars, I think what is the object of the tariff wars? Was it to lower prices? Was it to bring home a manufacturing to the U.S.? No, that's not going to happen. The only growth there seems to be is in, you know, the AI bubble, which is continues to inflate, but could very, very well pop very soon, according to a lot of experts, and data centers for this cartel of companies, like you just mentioned. Amazon has such market control that they can levy a tax on right across the board. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. That's not how the market should work. But if you have a monopoly over a large portion of the market, and not only that, Amazon has gamified the market itself by basically forcing individual companies to sell and market their product on Amazon and only on Amazon. And they have total control, just like big supermarkets have total control over food producers. And so you have the consolidation. So if this continues, and there's going to be an economic contraction, because that's what's going to happen with runaway inflation in this case, and there's going to be a contraction in the economy. That means that there's going to be a throttling of consumer spending. That means there's going to be ultimately a liquidity crisis. And guess where the capital is going to end up going somewhere, and it's going to be Howard Lutnick and all these Jared Kushner, the vulture capitalists, and private equity. They're going to manage the dismantling of large portions of the American economy and the SME sector and so forth. And guess what, Danny? That means the bailout's coming. The bailout's coming. Eventually, there'll be a bubble that pops. If it's not the AI bubble, it's the new housing bubble that they're currently trying to inflate. Right. And when that happens, it's going to be. And guess what? Guess where the Fed is going to tell all these banks to funnel all that money into private equity, and you're going to have an inflation of stock prices because they've trimmed up all the non-performing assets off of the books, and so the stock prices are doing great because they're turning a profit. So you get, again, these artificial boom bust cycles that Trump and Trump's base. Trump has lost the Rust Belt. He will lose the working class. He'll lose the independents. He loses the anti-war voters. Okay, his base is Wall Street, big oil and gas, big AI, the Israel lobby. That's Trump's base. That's it. There's nothing left. That's his base. And anyone stupid enough to be on the MAGA train at this point, you probably can't help you.
And here is proof of what you just said, Patrick. Eyeing a $1.5 trillion defense budget, Trump is, and proposing deep cuts to all other programs to fund military expansion, setting up a major budget battle for the midterms. Already looking quite bad for Donald Trump and the Republican Party, given that the war on Iran has absolutely zero, or at least it has a very low popularity. It might as well be zero, but it is hurting where it counts, which is independence and massive numbers, of course, of the opposition, which usually means you're in rough shape from here on out. Continue. Yeah.
But hey, Danny, at least Tulsi Gabbard's having a positive impact and a positive influence.
She might be gone. We might not even finish. We might not even finish before this. She might be fired.
she's still massaging his anti-war muscles in the background. That's what
Right.
there's
She's
some
about
good
to do
cope.
that.
There's a lot of good cope going
Yeah.
around on that one. So yeah, it's all going to be
Yeah,
good. Trust the
she's-
plan.
She's about to be doing that, on a tropical island somewhere, because rumors are is that Donald Trump is Pam Bondi's gone, and Tulsi Gabbard looks like she's going to be next. And for what? For absolutely nothing, because she's done very little to push back.
Well,
But
the value of her resignation. I mean, if she gets fired, that would be funny, because she had a chance to actually resign with honor
Exactly,
from that
right.
position when the president threw her under the bus a year ago, when her office pushed out an intelligence assessment saying Iran was not developing a nuclear bomb, and that ironically or not, that could have averted the 12-day war.
Yeah.
And we might not be having this conversation like we're having today. And that was all in the power of Tulsi Gabbard a year ago. And she chose her career over her principles, quite frankly. I can't see another way to explain that, but I'm sure it'll be in her memoirs. So
yeah,
you've got
I'm
you've
sure it
always
will
got
be.
that. You've got the book, and
Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, this was great. We're going to head out together. I want to make sure everybody knows that both your Substack and 21st Century Wire YouTube channel are in the video description below. All the places to support this channel are there as well. Anything you want to plug, Patrick, before we head out of here? I'll pull up the super chats.
No, I just if people can find it in their time and heart to go to 21stcenturywire.com, we and our YouTube channel. Absolutely, if they can go and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're heavily throttled on that platform, heavily throttled on YouTube. So we need physical help. We need people to come to hit our videos, hit the Sunday Wire, like, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That would make a world of difference.
Yeah, definitely do that, everyone, because Patrick does great independent work. Hit the like button before you go. I'll be back tomorrow, and of course, all those things to support this channel and to support Patrick's are in the video description. I'll see you tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern time. I'll let you know what's going on. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.